Hello, my name is Austin Pace, and I will be discussing my practicum project, the South Carolina Opioid Response Strategy. A little bit of background on this project. State Fire was not my initial choice for my practicum. However, I quickly learned that many organizations may not be very responsive or have certain barriers that make it very difficult for someone to come on as an intern. After meeting with several opportunities that did not pan out, State Fire was very willing to accommodate me and integrate me into their project in the community risk reduction section. A little bit of background about South Carolina State Fire. It comprises the Office of the State Fire Marshal, the State Fire Academy, as well as the state's disaster response teams. The community risk reduction section that I worked under serves to assist fire departments as well as other statewide initiatives to reduce hazards in communities. The primary hazard being fire, although they are working to broaden out a little bit as exampled by this project. Next slide. During the initial meetings on the project, the goal that was created was to develop a strategy to increase and support opioid overdose prevention and outreach efforts within the South Carolina Fire Service by addressing knowledge and resource gaps. Essentially, State Fire understood that they had next to no resources in the areas of overdose outreach and prevention that they could provide to fire departments should they need to, which undermined State Fire's ultimate goal of supporting the state's fire service. Once the goal was developed, 4 objectives were created. The first being to develop a fire department survey to be completed by that department's head or fire chief to better understand where the departments in the state are in terms of their capacity and readiness to take on opioid overdose prevention and outreach projects. A second survey was developed to look at the little more than 19,000 individual firefighters in the state to try to gauge their attitudes, perceptions, and knowledge around the opioid epidemic, as well as to understand their willingness to take on opioid outreach prevention projects within their own departments. The third goal was to look at an online resource guide and toolbox. The resource guide providing information to individuals that may be suffering from opioid use disorder or substance use disorder, as well as any of their families or loved ones that may need assistance as well, so that departments have something that they can provide those individuals with. The toolbox portion is specifically for the departments, somewhat of a how-to if they want to start developing their own prevention or outreach initiatives, as well as contact information for agencies that may already be doing those initiatives in the state so that they have someone they can refer questions to. The last objective was the December 2nd live training event for firefighters in the state at the State Fire Academy. This would provide them education on the problem posed by opioids in South Carolina, what is currently being seen, trends, what is being done to address the issue, and what resources are available to their departments to better address the issue. Next slide. The fire department survey yielded 77 respondents, or about a little less than 16% of the 481 fire departments in the state. Most of the respondents were combination departments, meaning they have both paid and volunteer staff, followed by volunteer departments, meaning they have no paid staff whatsoever, being the next largest cohort, and then our smallest cohort being the career departments, meaning they have no volunteer staff whatsoever. Next slide. Data from the survey was broken down based on the staffing model, examining the types of areas that these departments serve, urban versus rural, and then also tracking certain metrics like whether or not the department keeps statistics on overdoses they respond to, if they have any current opioid initiatives, and then what sort of opioid-related initiatives their department would be interested in engaging, if any. The areas that they highlighted the most, particularly among the combination departments, were wellness for first responders as well as education initiatives. Additionally, we polled departments on their knowledge of SCORF eligibility. SCORF is the South Carolina Opioid Recovery Fund, and many of the departments are eligible to receive funds for that for any of those initiatives that you see in this other graphic here next to the pie chart. Next slide. In the firefighter survey, 234 responses, or roughly 1.2% of the a little more than 19,000 firefighters were received, representing 39 of the state's 46 counties. Looking at how these survey results were received, the majority report that their primary role is a firefighter, with the next two highest areas being frontline personnel, apparatus operators, or frontline officers. Next slide. Being a more individualized survey, several areas were a bit different. There were two open-ended questions in this survey looking at these respondents to describe a recent response to an opioid overdose incident, as well as just a general open-ended question for any additional information they wanted to share. Most of the respondents reported that they had responded to an opioid overdose, over 87%. Of the 191 open-ended responses describing response to an opioid overdose incident, the largest subtheme noted was describing treatment of an individual experiencing the overdose, describing their critical status at the moment of response, describing these events as repetitive, frustrating, dealing with angry patients, and in some cases dangerous. What this led to was looking more into the exposure of firefighters to the repetitive trauma from responding to overdoses and what their needs in terms of wellness may be. Next slide. Going into more depth about some of the other objectives, the resource guide and toolbox contains a myriad of areas with heavy emphasis on recovery community organizations, as in many parts of the state these organizations serve as navigators and resource brokers to all of the other different resources around recovery assistance, treatment, and so on. We also included mental health resources as well, given the high comorbidity with substance use and mental health. For the toolbox section, several areas included planning community type events, planning outreach events, and then most importantly, contact information for those agencies that are already doing those specific type of prevention or outreach, so that there can be questions answered if needed. And then lastly, the training session on December 2nd. It will be 6 sessions progressing from information on the problem to actually addressing it, and then what resources are available to the departments in the state. Vendors from the resources, many listed in the resource guide, will also be on hand so they can answer participants' questions and interact with them. Lastly, in reflecting on the project and some lessons learned, it was surprising to see how much of the risk reduction section's efforts were only on fire safety. This is truly a paradigm shift for state fire, branching out into overdose prevention versus just solely response. From my own standpoint, there should have been a greater emphasis on getting the surveys out early and then shaping training around the data that was brought in from the surveys, as well as some of the other resources developed. State Fire, as a result of this survey, wants to do more data-driven training moving forward. Additionally, the state fire leadership needs to be involved when sampling individual firefighters. So this will ensure buy-in. That was something I did not fully grasp initially, and ultimately led to us having 2 surveys versus 1. And then more training and support is needed to better prevent and respond to opioid overdose epidemic and ensure that first responder wellness is addressed. Thank you for your time.